So, investing on a minimum wage salary. Investing on a minimum wage salary. It's going to be challenging, but not impossible. The first thing we have to do is define what is minimum wage. To answer that, let's jump into my computer.
Okay, so here we are in my computer. So when you start talking about or studying about the minimum wage, there's two things you're going to come across. One is going to be the federal minimum wage, and one is going to be the state minimum wage. Obviously, there's 50 different states and several other territories. The federal minimum wage is basically the minimum wage that the federal government sets. Currently, it is $7.25 per hour. That is the federal minimum wage. Okay? But you have many different states, and each state can set their own minimum wage. Now, each state has its own minimum wage. It can be higher than the federal minimum wage. So you could have a minimum wage of a particular state that is 10, 12, 13, $14 an hour. But it cannot be lower than the federal minimum wage, right? Because it says right here, states with your own hourly wage requirements may exceed this rate, but employers specifically covered by the Fair Labor Standards Act must adhere to the federal minimum wage. So if they adhere to this act, they must adhere to it. So they can be higher than the federal minimum wage, but they cannot be lower. But like we said, there's different states and they have their own minimum wage. So let's look at the state minimum wage. So now here we are on the state minimum wage, right? They show they show the state on the left column and the 2023 and the 2024 minimum wage. So Alabama was $7.25 in 2023, and it is the same in 2024. Now you see that it is at the level of the federal minimum wage, which is $7.25, right? It is at the federal level. Alaska is $10. Alaska was $10.85 in 2023, and it had raised or increased to $11.73, right? Effective January 1st, 2024. Arizona, $13.85 last year, and now $14.35. So you see different states, and they have different um, minimum wage, okay? For some reason, I'm thinking about Virginia. I don't know why. I'm thinking about Virginia. So we'll look at Virginia and see that their minimum wage is $12. So now we have to pause. Making the minimum wage is not a lot of money. You're going to have to be very strategic and diligent if you want to invest any money, okay?
Whether you're working at fast food restaurants, whether it be McDonald's or Burger King, whether you work in a warehouse job, no matter where you're working at minimum wage and you're trying to invest to begin to build your wealth. That's what we're talking about today on the MD Investor. Okay? So I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Working at a minimum wage job and investing, first of all, good on you that you're trying to better yourself. You're trying to better your future by investing. That being said, it is going to be challenging, obviously, because if you look at the minimum wage, it is not that much. And you're going to have to be very deliberate with your spending. Okay? Right? We know that the minimum wage varies depending on the state you live in. We know that the minimum wage varies depending on the state you live in, right? Depending if you live in, Illinois or New York or Florida or Texas, they have different minimum wage. But what we can say is that no matter where it is low. And we're going to have to be very strategic in our investing. Okay? The first thing that we're going to have to focus on is our budget. We're going to have to be hyper focused because there's no margin for error, right? If you have a larger income, you can blow $500 on a dinner and still be able to have a little money left over to invest. On a minimum wage, you blow $500, and that could be a big, large portion of your check, and you may not be able to invest. Okay, so we'll have to be hyper focused on our budget. We're going to have to track everything. We're going to track all of our spending, whether it's Netflix or entertainment or clothes or phone. We're going to track them so we'll know where our money's going. Okay, because think about it. If you're making minimum wage, let's take $12 an hour. You're making $12 an hour, and you're working 40 hours a week. You're going to make about $480 per week. So that's going to be about around $2,000 a month, or somewhere around $2,000 a month. That's going to be about $25,000 a year. Not a ton of money. But like I said, there are people who may earn more than you, but if they spend everything, they have nothing to invest. And you may earn less, but if you are able to lower your expenses, you may be able to invest a lot more than people who are earning more than you. So that's number one. We're going to have to track our expenses. Number two, we're going to have to focus on the big tickets. We're going to have to focus on the big tickets. The big tickets are usually housing. So we're going to definitely have to focus on housing. A large portion of your money goes out into housing. Okay? They said you should spend no more than 28% on your housing. Lots of people are spending more than 28%. Some people are spending half of their take-home pay on just housing. So the big tickets, housing, transportation is another one. So your car, the vehicle you drive is such an important and large portion of where your money goes. But it's not just the car payment every month or for the lease. If you're leasing it, please don't do that if you are. But it's also car payment or the lease payment. It's also the maintenance and the inspection and the gas and insurance that adds up. So we're going to have to look at that, okay? The cheapest thing for us to do, honestly, is probably going to be public transportation. When you're at this level, you're going to have to humble yourself. Public transportation is probably going to be the most cost-efficient way for you to get around. Riding a bicycle, to be honest, or something like that, something cheap, okay? Because we're starting at the bottom, right? We're starting at the bottom. So we're going to humble ourselves. So it is housing, and for housing, we know it's very expensive. And for that, we're going to have to be creative. On minimum wage, you may have to take a roommate in because this rent may be too much for one person. And I'm assuming you're a single person. So you may have to have a roommate. You may have to move in with family members, right? Just to share the cost of rent, right? That may be something you have to do, at least in the beginning, while you're getting your feet under you to get stable. Another large expense would be food, okay? Housing, transportation, and food. So you're going to have to be careful in terms of your shopping, right? So you cannot go out and spending all this money on going out to dinner all the time. You're going to have to cook your meals, okay? You have to eat chicken. You have to get ground beef. You have to get, like basic stuff. And you're doing all of this so you can have money to invest, right? You're trying to invest on minimum wage. So you're going to have to humble yourself. So number three, other people may not talk about is you're going to need some type of help. I'm assuming you're single, but a lot of people are not. They have children. We didn't consider childcare if you have kids, and um, the expense associated with that. The children need clothes, and they need food, and they need health care. So you'll probably need some assistance, whether it's going to be in the form of government assistance, government health care, Medicaid, or maybe there's a family member you know may help to maybe watch your children. Maybe there's a family member who does not work, family member who's retired or on disability or is home who can actually help share the cost, okay? So that you don't have to pay exorbitant amount of money for childcare because you're working, right, when the child is home, so you're gonna need help, okay? And that's something that I think in the U.S. people don't talk about a lot. You see immigrants who come to this country and they work together, right? So there'll be 4, 5, 6 people living in one apartment, but if they're all working and they only pay that one rent, that money that can be funded together, it helps them, right? And in 5, 10 years, they're going out of that neighborhood because for 3 years they sacrificed and they lived in that 2 bedroom apartment, and the and the cost of housing for all of them was low because they're sharing, and the money that they're saving, they're able to save up until they can move forward. You may look at them in the beginning and say, "Oh, all of them live in an apartment," but hey, they live in an apartment. They are saving money and expenses, and they are pooling their funds together. And in a few years, you realize they're out of there and they're moving on to bigger and better things. So working together, I believe, it's something that can be very advantageous for everyone, but especially when you're making minimum wage. Okay, when I'm off and you're working, I can watch your children. When you're off and I'm working, you can watch my children. We can kind of work together, so we don't have to pay for daycare, right? You understand? Or so I don't have to pay rent to another landlord, and you don't have to pay rent to another landlord, but we are working together. And number four, we have to prioritize investments. That's the whole purpose why we're doing all this. All of this thing that we're doing, this sacrificing, to budget and to count our pennies and to ride the bicycle and to take the bus, um, and to live together, maybe two families living together, and to sharing the rent. All of this is so that we can have money to invest. Okay, whether your employer offers a 401k or not, we still got to invest. If they do offer 401k and maybe a match, we're going to take advantage of it because that's free money. Whether we can get 100 or 200 bucks into that every month, your future self will thank you. Because if you don't, in a 5 years or 10 years, you're going to be exactly where you are because you did not do anything in the previous 5 or 10 years. But now we are laying the foundation now so that in 5 to 10 years, you can look back in 5 to 10 years and say, I'm not where I want to be, but I am so much further than I was 5 or 10 years ago, all because of the strategies and techniques I've put in place and I have followed. So we got to prioritize investing. Okay, a simple S&P 500 index fund is enough at this point. We don't have to do single stock investment. A single S&P 500 investment ETF like VOO from Vanguard is perfect. If your company offers a 401k and a match, because you're making minimum wage, you will qualify because you're below the income minimum to invest in a Roth IRA. This would be a great start, absolutely great start. So if you can put in $100 a month, $200 a month into this Roth IRA, that would be excellent. Okay, if you can put $200 a month, that'd be great. If you could, so all your saving from maybe not having a car, from sharing the housing cost, from not having to pay childcare, put all of that money. that savings or a large portion of it into your investing. Of course, you want to have an emergency fund in case things were to happen. If your employer do not have a 401k, then open a brokerage account from Vanguard or Fidelity or Schwab or one of those brokerage houses and begin to invest. So the fifth thing you want to do when you're working a minimum wage job is you have to think about increasing your skills, whether it's getting more training, more certification, going back to school. You have to get more training or education to increase your income, because the more income you earn, if you keep your expenses relatively stable, the more you can invest. You can increase your quality of life. Again, this is the MD Investor with another video to increase our financial IQ so we can teach our children and break the cycle of generational poverty. MD Investor out.